Hey, we can go. Sorry. I thought I said that, Tegan. That was good. Sorry.
No, my fault. Thanks everyone for joining. Stephen, please take it away.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the MPO meeting today. I'll read the notices at the beginning. I'm going to turn it over to David after to read the roll. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, veteran status, or background. Just as the guidelines have been for quite a while now, all participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After the roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair, meaning me, will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical questions, please call Srileka Murthy via the chat box or smurthy, smurthy at ctps.org or 857-702-3705. Now I'll read the accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Sri Lanka Murthy, MPO staff at smurthy at ctps.org or 857-702-3705. All right, Dave, you want to take away the roll?
Absolutely. Mascot seat 1.
Steve Wolfo, representing Secretary and CEO of MassDOT. Monica Tippett's not here.
Thank you. Mascot seat 2. We will return MassDOT Highway Division.
John Romano here.
MBTA.
Sandy Johnson, representing General Manager Phil Ang and the MBTA.
Massport.
Sarah Lee, representing Massport.
MAPC.
Eric Barrasso with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Thank you. MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board.
Advisory Council.
Hunter Jenkins, Advisory Council here.
City of Boston BTD.
Representing Mayor Michelle Wu in the City of Boston.
City of Boston BPDA.
Hi, Jim Fitzgerald with BPDA, representing Mayor Wu in the City of Boston.
At-large City of Everett.
Jay Monty, representing Mayor DiMaria in the City of Everett.
At-large City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
At-large Town of Arlington.
Morning, John Alessi, representing Select Board Chair Eric Helmuth in the Town of Arlington.
At-large Town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute, representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green for the Town of Brookline.
Intercore Committee, City of Somerville. We will return Minuteman Advisory Group on
Good morning. Sorry to be slow on the draw, David. This is Brad Rawson representing Mayor Ballantyne and Intercore. Tom Bent will be joining and taking over the heavy lifting here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Kristen Guichard, representing Acton Select Board Chair Jim Snyder Grant for the Magic Subregion.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giambetti, representing Metro West, and Mayor Charles Szyczki.
North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly. City of Beverly. We will return North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
Hi, Chris Diorio, representing Hull Select Board Chair Greg Gray for the South Shore Coalition. Thanks.
Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Hi, Rachel Benson, here representing Joe Botash for the town of Rentham and SWAP.
Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trick subregion.
Federal Highway Administration.
Good morning, Ken Miller, Federal Highway.
Good morning. Federal Transit Administration.
Good morning, Kirsty Hostetter representing Region 1.
Is there anyone we have not called on the roll? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, everyone else. I will move on to agenda item 2, which is the chair's report. I do not have one. So let's move to agenda item 3, the executive director's report, and Tegan, please take it away.
Thanks. Lost my mute button. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. For my executive director's report, next slide, please. I'll start with a few staff updates. So first, I am very pleased to announce a recent internal hire into a key position. So Erin McGuire, who many of you should know from meetings like this one, has recently taken on her new role as transportation planner. She actually joined the staff at the start of 2023 and has very quickly advanced through a few positions from administrative coordinator to assistant planner to her current position as transportation planner. And in that role, she will focus on the long-range transportation plan. And that'll include being in charge of carrying out the coordination with colleagues across the agency and with our partners to work towards ensuring that we meet our commitment to the implementation of Destination 2050, which will be the next long-range plan. So please reach out and congratulate her in her new role. And I look forward to working with you all as we start to work towards the next long-range plan together. And then next slide. As I have mentioned in our last meeting and meetings prior to that, we are actively recruiting for a number of positions. So I want to thank you all for where you have been able to help us to spread the word about these openings. And I wanted to highlight that we have 7 positions, several of which are relatively new. First of all, we are hiring for an assistant planner, and that's in sort of the area of carrying out some of the support work that Erin McGuire was carrying out in her prior role. We are also recruiting for a transportation planner, program manager, and that person would be focused on the congestion management process. We are also recruiting for a finance coordinator, and then also human resources and operations assistant. So those 2 are new administrative roles that we are recruiting for. And then we have the ongoing recruitments going on for the manager of model development, a travel demand modeler, that would be a principal analyst, and a transportation planner in the capital programming area. Next slide, please. So please note, we have asked you for the board members to respond to a request for an RSVP. As we've been sharing, the next 2 MPO meetings after this one will be held in person at the boardroom at the State Transportation Building. That's at 10 Park Plaza in Boston. There will be a virtual option, but we are hoping that you can join us in person if at all possible due to the topics that we'll be discussing and the fact that board members have said that it's easier to discuss tip scenario planning with kind of paper at hand and also the ability to discuss sort of live with each other. So to try to estimate who will be there, Dave Hong did share an email with a survey link on March 4th. So if you could RSVP to that and let us know if you are going to attend in person, it would be very much appreciated for planning purposes. The next slide. My next item I wanted to highlight has to do with a material that we have posted related to letters of support for discretionary grants. So just as a reminder, back in October, board members discussed developing a process that would involve signing letters of support for projects proponents who are applying to federal discretionary grants. And what you all discussed and agreed on is that you would empower the chair and the vice chair to review any of these kinds of requests for a letter of support, to work with staff to determine whether the requests would be aligned with the MPO's vision, goals, and objectives. And if so, that a draft letter could be developed and then signed by the chair. And so what we've done is we've developed a template or sort of an outline of that draft letter and posted it online for you to be able to take a look at. And it just gives us a structure to work with so that we can work a bit more quickly, and it gives you a sense of what that support letter will look like. We do ask that anyone asking for the MPO support give us at least 2 weeks notice so that we can turn around this process. The intent is that whenever possible, the request and any discussion about questions or concerns about the request would be brought before the board. But in those prior discussions, you all kind of recognize that that's not always feasible given the deadline requirements for the applications for discretionary grants and the amount of coordination that's needed. So that's why we wanted to have sort of a letter ready to go, and why you kind of empowered the chair and the vice chair to make decisions when there wasn't time to bring those kind of conversations and proposals to the full board. So if you have any further questions about the process or about the template letter or outline letter that was posted to the materials, I'm happy to answer in the Q&A after this report. Or of course, feel free to reach out to me at any other point after this meeting and we can always discuss. Next slide, please. So just highlighting today's agenda. In addition to meeting minutes, we'll have 2 action items today. One will be another discussion about performance targets, and this time it will be about the transit asset management performance targets. We will ask the board to vote to endorse those targets, and they will be presented by Sam Taylor from MPO staff, as well as Angela Cervello from MBTA staff. Then we will also have a TIP amendment to ask you to vote for a 21-day public review. And Ethan Lapointe will, of course, present on that, as well as present the major presentation for today, which is the scoring of newly submitted TIP projects. So Ethan Lapointe will run through all of those. And that is in preparation for the next meetings. Next slide. Just to highlight again, they will be in-person options for participation at the next 2 meetings in March and April. And the primary topic of conversation at those meetings will be what we call the preliminary project programming scenarios. So looking at how we balance out the funding availability and the project requests and costs throughout the 5 years of the TIP. We also may have some other presentations on some of the MPO work, so expect those agendas to be pretty robust, and we will look forward hopefully to seeing you in person. And just a reminder again, please reply to Dave Hong's email asking for you to RSVP. And that is it, Mr. Chair.
Yes, it looks like Brian, you have a question for Tegan?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So Tegan, thank you for the report. When the chair's signature is requested on a letter of support, is it the secretary that we're asking or someone else?
So typically in the past, David Muller has signed as the designee of the chair. And Steve, I don't know if you have anything else that you would like to add to that. That has been the past practice of this board.
Yeah, I think that covers it, Tegan.
All right, well, just note, it'd probably be more helpful if we can get the secretary to sign. I know she's very busy, but she is the chair of the MPO.
Well, the practice is, Brian, is the way we usually do it. It's either David or I sign, depending on the which of us chairs an MPO meeting. So it's worked in other MPOs. I can talk to David, but that's how we've done it for quite a few years. So if you're
I understand, Steve. I'm just trying to draw a distinction between the chair of the MPO and the person who presides at meetings. The secretary, as it says in all of our documents, is the actual chair. So I don't want to lose sight of that, is all. But you guys do a great job representing her. I'm not saying anything else. That's all.
All right. Point taken, Brian. All right. Anyone else have any questions for Tegan? All right. Thank you, Tegan. We will now move to public comments, which is agenda item 4. I believe Senator Lovely, is she here yet? Because I know she wanted to speak. I want to recognize her first and then open up to everyone else.
Thank you so very much. I am here. I'm really here just to kind of get acquainted with this process and just to see how this unfolds for particular projects in Salem that are being listed in meetings that are coming up in subsequent meetings later this month and I believe in April. So that was just my point. I'm here to learn from all of you, the experts, and I so appreciate the opportunity to learn all of this at this much more detailed level. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Christina.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the MPO board. It's nice to see all of you. My name is Christina Johnson. I am the Director of Planning and Community Development for the town of Hudson. I'm also the TIP contact for the municipality. I'm here to today to advocate for the town of Hudson with respect to receiving design pilot funds. This is the new pilot program created by the MPO. And this is a really important first step in helping municipalities, especially smaller jurisdictions like Hudson, to be able to advance very, very complex projects. And oftentimes the design responsibility falls on the municipality. And for those that are uninitiated, going to town meeting is kind of like going to casino night. So the ability to fund large amounts of design monies is just impossible for smaller jurisdictions. We are beginning our next rail trail. Hudson does have a legacy of rail trail design and development with the Assabet River Rail Trail. Some of you longstanding members of the MPO board may remember the town of Hudson advancing that effort in the mid-2000s. So we do have demonstrated competency in moving forward rail trails. This would be the Mass Central Rail Trail. This would connect to a regional network connecting basically the town of Berlin all the way to the city of Waltham. So this is a huge step forward in helping the town create its connections into the regional network. We are asking for about $900,000. Our local community preservation committee stepped up wholeheartedly with almost a $300,000 match, which is really demonstrating the community's commitment to this project. Currently, we have a Mass Trails grant like many other jurisdictions, and we are completing a preliminary feasibility study. And the end deliverable of this study will be basically enough information that we can go to DOT and get our PRC approval and make this design effort 100% federal aid eligible and start to go through the MPO process. The town of Hudson has not been on the tip since probably 2013. And so I implore many of you to think about the smaller jurisdictions who are trying to get some of these complicated projects done. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The deputy director, Pam Helnick, who's the project manager, is also on the Zoom. So when you have the scoring discussion later on, if you have any questions, we'll be hanging on to answer them. I thank you for your time and your consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. All right, I'm going to grab the person on the phone with the 508-751-1755, and then I'm going to call in Sarkis afterwards.
I'm the person on the phone. It's Melissa with Burlington.
Okay. All right. So I will move on to Sarkis Sarkeesian. Go ahead, Sarkis.
Hey, good morning. Sarkis Sarkeesian, Director of Planning and Community Development for the City of Framingham. I just want to thank the MPO staff, as stated by Christina Johnson. This program, this pilot program that you guys have put together is really helping advance the City of Framingham's Chris Walsh Trail that we've applied for. I mean, Chris Walsh served, he was a state representative from 2010 to 2018, and he loved planning. He loved what this organization does, and his vision was to have this trail. This Chris Walsh Trail is a connection. Framingham is the hub also to the Bruce Freeman Trail, which we're working with the MPO and with, obviously the other cities and towns that connect, basically Lowell to Framingham. This will be an interconnecting point in our downtown. Our downtown right now has received temporary certification regarding the MBTA grant, and this is going to continue to make that connection happen. And I just, I know there's going to be comment period later today, and I'll be here to answer any questions you may have. But this project wouldn't advance in a timely fashion if we didn't have this pilot. And I think Dennis is on here. I also think a big shout out needs to go to him because he was the architect to help get some of these projects that would never be funded off the ground. So again, I want to thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Sarkis. Jim?
Hi, thank you so much, Chair. Just a brief comment. I really want to thank the tireless efforts of the CTPS staff. Thank you especially to Ethan and to Tegan for your work and everyone else. This TIP process is obviously long involved, and you guys have been amazing. I appreciate the consideration of this board regarding the new transit transformation project we have for low emission vehicles here in Metro West. This will be a transformational project for the MWRTA, as it will be the first time we utilize heavy duty, full size transit vehicles in our service. Traditionally, we have only used cut vans. This will allow us to reduce the emissions per passenger mile and passenger trip throughout the region, while also improving the overall operational performance of our system. I look forward to the coming months in this TIP process, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have regarding this project or any of the other RTA projects. Again, thank you to the CTPS staff and to this board for your consideration on this transformational project.
All right. And my understanding is, John, is that you on the phone, John Bouchard?
No, we're trying to help unmute, but I'm not sure. We must be having technical difficulties at the moment.
Right. Is there anyone else that has any comments, public comments, as we try to fix John's connection?
Oh, there, looks like they unmuted.
All right.
Steve, this is John Bouchard.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
I
John.
am on. I'm listening. My laptop will not connect for me, so I'll stay on the phone until I'm able to solve that problem.
All right. Thank you, John. Anyone else have any
Thank you. Sorry.
public comments? Sorry, John. Yeah. Anyone else have any public comments? All right. Seeing none, let's move to agenda item 5. And do any committee chairs have reports? Derek?
Yep, thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know that the Unified Planning Work Program Committee will be meeting today at 1 p.m. Over Zoom. The meeting materials are all posted to the CTPS meeting calendar webpage. We'll be going over the universe of proposed studies for the fiscal year 2025 Unified Planning Work Program. So just kind of walking through projects that were received, project ideas that were received through the survey and other means. So looking forward to that. It's always a great discussion and hope to see folks at 1 p.m. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Derek? Not seeing any. Tom, and then Jen, and then Brian.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and good morning to all. Our last MOU committee meeting was yesterday, March 6th. We continued the discussion of RTA representation on the board, and the consensus was to recommend that the RTAs would have a seat on the MPO board. We will bring forward our recommendation with details to the MPO board at a future meeting. We also had a discussion on board education. We looked at examples of how MPOs invest money in capacity into educating and creating peer exchange opportunities for boards. We're looking at several different avenues to do this. And our next meeting will be on Wednesday, March 20th at 1:30 p.m.
Any questions for Tom? All right, Jen?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to share that the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee met on February 15th. We debriefed and dove a little bit more deeply into the readiness changes we discussed at the previous MPO meeting, heard a draft scoring update, which we'll cover for the whole board this meeting. And then we also decided to have 2 March meetings. They'll be staggered onto MPO off weeks. The first one will be this coming Thursday at 1 p.m. We expect to hear about how the disparate impact mitigation analysis and process for TIP development will go, and also have a conversation around TIP scenario development, focusing on how to prioritize all of the design pilot projects, the new projects in federal fiscal year 29, and then ways we might manage the funding shortfall in 27. All I have. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Jen? All right, thanks, Jen. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the A&F committee met last Thursday, the 29th. We got an update on spending through state fiscal year Q2. Things are generally in good shape, according to budget. A few issues, but the staff are working through it diligently. And we also discussed the executive director's progress towards her goals and objectives. And it's great to have these processes up and running, and the committee on behalf of the full board getting regular updates to make sure that things are running smoothly and there's no surprises. Thank you very much.
All right, anyone have any questions for Brian? Seeing none. All right, thank you, Brian. We will now move on to agenda item 6, which is the update from the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just add to Brian's report that the executive director's report was phenomenal. It was really quite informative. If you have a chance to go and look at it towards the end of the meeting, I think you'll learn a lot and be, just learn a lot. So on to my material. We have not had a meeting since our last meeting. Our upcoming meeting, though, will feature an introduction, or at least the beginning of our discussion about how the advisory council is going to fit into our revision of the MOU, the memorandum of understanding. And we're also going to have an extensive review of the early stages of the UPWP process, that was just mentioned a little while ago by Derek, and we'll also have an update on the TIP planning process by Ethan. And in closing, I want to say I have tremendous respect for the senator, any legislator that wants to get into the trenches and learn something like this. I really applaud you, and also invite you to any of our meetings if you want to learn a little bit more, spend a little more time talking about things in a little more relaxed environment. And I am still chuckling over that statement. Going to town meeting is like going to casino night. Classic. Thank you. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone have any questions for Leonard? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Leonard. All right, let's move on to agenda item 7, which is an action item. The first one we have today. It is for the meeting minutes of January 18th. Can I get a motion, second to approve? And then I'll open up to comments, questions. Jen?
We'll motion to approve the meeting minutes from January 18th.
All right, let's see. Tom?
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
All right, anyone have any changes or comments on the minutes? Ken, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a correction. On page 15, it shows Joshua Barber representing FTA. Joshua represents Federal Highway.
All right. So Jen and Tom, you fine with that editor's change?
Yes.
Anyone else have, and Jen, I think, shook her head. So
yes.
Any other changes or comments anyone has? All right, seeing none. David, you want to read the roll, please?
Yes. Steve Wolfel,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins,
Yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Dave Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Brad Rawson, or Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Chris Diorio,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Is there anyone else that I have missed?
John Bouchard.
Yeah,
John Bouchard,
Melissa Tintopolis.
thank you.
Darlene Wynn. Melissa Tintopolis, yes.
Thank you. Recording votes for Melissa Tintopolis, Darlene Wynn, and John Bouchard as well. With that, the motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. We'll move on to our next action item, agenda item 8, which is the transit asset management performance targets, which is Sam Taylor from MPO staff and Angela Savello from MBT staff. So please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just waiting for the slides. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Taylor. I'm the manager of performance-based planning and programming, and today I will be presenting to you the 2024 Transit Asset Management Performance Targets. Next slide, please. Oh, back one, please. Thank you. So a quick overview of what we will cover today. I will provide a quick refresher on performance-based planning and programming activities. We will touch base briefly on the process by which transit asset management or TAM targets are adopted. I will quickly describe what the TAM performance measures before you are. And these measures apply to the 3 RTAs in the region, which are MBTA, the Cape Ann Transportation Authority, and the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. Angela Cervello of the MBTA will then present the T's targets. Then I will present the targets put forth for CADA and MWRTA. We'll discuss some next steps, including how the TAM targets feed into MPO programming. And then we will ask the board to take a vote on the presented 2024 targets. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So in terms of performance measures that are housed in performance-based planning and programming, the transit asset management targets before you are the third of 3 performance target areas that will need to be adopted by the board this winter. As stated in previous MPO meetings later this year, likely in July, 4-year greenhouse gas emissions targets will be put forward for adoption. Those are currently being worked on in conjunction with other MPOs in the Boston urbanized area, or UZA. Next slide, please. So on your screen is the target process for the TAM performance measures that applicable agencies follow. The process begins with the U.S. Department of Transportation. US DOT has established requirements via the Transit Asset Management Rule. Transit agencies then write their own TAM plans, which include past performance and targets. However, the TAM plans themselves need not be updated annually, and plans for each RTA can be found on the MPO meeting calendar where you access this meeting. And then MPOs then work with transit agencies to set regional targets. Next slide, please. So the FTA requires transit agencies and MPOs to set targets for TAM performance measures as part of the federal TAM rule. The MPO reviews transit asset performance as part of reviewing capital programming for the TIP. And while MPOs and transit agencies are required to comply with the TAM rule, any failure to comply does not impact the allocation of federal funds. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes the roles and responsibilities between transit agencies and MPOs. Transit agencies develop TAM plans every 4 years, report their performance to the National Transit Database, or NTD, on an annual basis, and set appropriate performance targets on TAM measures on an annual basis. MPOs then set TAM targets for their regions, and MPOs consider capital programming in the context of TAM performance, primarily through the TIPS, transit transformation and transit improvement programs. The MPO also incorporates TAM information and targets into its planning documents, such as the TIP and the Long Range Transportation Plan. Next slide, please. This slide shows the actual TAM performance measures, which fall into 4 asset categories: rolling stock, equipment, facilities, and fixed guideway infrastructure. In a moment, Angela Cervello of MBTA will further define these 4 asset categories, but please let this slide serve as a helpful primer. Rolling stock and equipment vehicles are evaluated on their age or useful life benchmark, which you may hear as ULB. Facilities are evaluated on their condition every 4 years, and fixed guideway infrastructure, or rail tracks, are evaluated based on the percentage of tracks that can run trains without speed restrictions. Please note that fixed guideway infrastructure applies only to MBTA, as it is the only RTA in the region with rail tracks. Next slide, please. And now I will turn it over to Angela Cervello.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Angela.
Excellent. So good morning. My name is Angela Cervello. I am the Deputy Director of Capital Strategy at the MBTA, and I'm going to be walking through the MBTA's Transit Asset Management, or TAM, performance measures and targets. Next slide, please. So just, I guess, a little bit of framing. As you just heard, the MBTA is required each year to report performance measures on the state of our asset classes, as well as set targets for the next year. This is a reporting exercise that we work on throughout the first quarter of the fiscal year and then submit to the FTA each October. So today I will be sharing our measures or actuals for fiscal year 23 and then the targets that we've set for fiscal year 24. The 4 asset categories we're going through, as Sam just mentioned, are rolling stock, equipment, facilities, and infrastructure, which refers specifically to track speed restrictions. But I do just want to quickly note before I get into the presentation that the MBTA has a really diverse and complex asset inventory that includes more than just these 4 asset categories that I'm going to be discussing. These are just the 4 categories that are subject to this analysis and this reporting requirement. So moving right into rolling stock, this asset category refers to revenue vehicles that provide passenger service to our customers. This includes buses, rail cars, locomotives, ferry boats, and paratransit vans and automobiles. So the performance measure for this asset category uses age as a proxy for condition and focuses on the percentage of revenue vehicles that have reached or exceeded their useful life benchmark. And a lower measure indicates better fleet condition overall. So just as a reminder, the useful life benchmark estimates the expected life cycle of a fleet and is assigned based on vehicle type. It is generally FTA defined using standard ULBs for each type of vehicle in our inventory. I do want to emphasize that the age of a vehicle does not necessarily indicate its condition or actual performance. There can be older vehicles that perform well, even if they are beyond this benchmark. So age is just a proxy for condition here. Next slide, please. So this table compares our fiscal year 22 and 23 measures or actuals with the targets that we've set for fiscal year 24. And this measure is reported at the vehicle type level. So that would be the second column from the left in the table. Overall, we've hovered at around 21 or 22% of our revenue vehicles being beyond the ULB, but I'd just like to highlight some of the specifics. So we've seen an increase in this measure for articulated buses. This is due to a fleet hitting its useful life benchmark during fiscal year 23. We are targeting that this measure will increase slightly again this year, and that's just because a few more vehicles will be hitting that benchmark. And again, I just want to emphasize that the useful life benchmark is exactly that, a benchmark, and we are working to replace these vehicles. So we will start to see this measure come down in the future as we get the new fleets online and in active revenue service and are able to retire the older fleets. For standard buses, that measure is improving this year because we have received and accepted the New Flyer hybrid buses. So standard bus is also referred to as bus in this table. Both commuter rail and heavy rail improved in fiscal year 23, and that is due to ongoing vehicle procurements. Targets for fiscal year 24 account for the continued delivery of the new Hyundai Rotem coaches, as well as the CRRC heavy rail vehicles. Finally, for paratransit, this year we again had no vehicles that were at or beyond their ULB. However, this is going to change next year when approximately a quarter of our paratransit van fleet hits the useful life benchmark. This is another instance where the benchmark is not necessarily representative of the actual performance of the fleet. There are other metrics that we use, like miles traveled, that we use to determine how long a fleet is able to perform. So we expect to keep these vans a little while longer. That's why you're seeing the target for next year increase. But when we do start replacing those vehicles, that will start to come back down. Next slide, please. Moving into equipment, this asset category refers to the non-revenue rubber tire or steel wheel vehicles that serve in any kind of support capacity and don't support passenger service, or rather aren't used for passenger service. So this includes first response vehicles, tow trucks, spot tampers, crane cars, snow plows, things like that. Similar to rolling stock, the equipment performance measure focuses on the percentage of vehicles that have met or exceeded the useful life benchmark. I want to note again, age does not necessarily determine vehicle performance, and this is particularly true in this asset class. Some equipment is stored indoors most of the year and used pretty sporadically. Think of things like snowplows, so they can perform adequately even if used, if they are beyond the useful life benchmark. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the overall percentage of non-revenue vehicles at or beyond the useful life benchmark increased pretty significantly this year. This was due to a large number of vehicles reaching that benchmark, as well as the non-cyclical nature of vehicle retirement for equipment. These vehicles are not necessarily retired in consistent quantities or at consistent times throughout the year, so this process doesn't really follow the fiscal year cycle. This makes it somewhat challenging to set targets because we're not necessarily removing equipment from the inventory on a consistent basis. If it is still on property, it is included in this analysis. So because of this, the fiscal year 24 target accounts for the continued aging of our existing equipment fleet. There are 5 steel wheel vehicles and 28 rubber tire vehicles that will reach the benchmark this year. And at this time, we do not have enough information about the retirement schedule to be able to project what will be removed from the inventory by June 30th of this year. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next category is facilities. This includes 2 asset types. The first is passenger and parking facilities, and the other includes maintenance and administrative facilities. So any support facility that isn't used by customers, riders. This measure uses condition ratings to indicate stage of good repair. The condition rating is a composite score based on an on-site assessment of multiple components of a facility. And it uses a 1 to 5 scale where 1 indicates poor condition and 5 indicates excellent condition. This measure focuses on the percentage of facility assets that are below a 3 on this scale, indicating either poor or fair condition. Next slide, please. So per FTA guidance, each facility asset is assessed on a 4-year cycle. This means that in any given year, only a subsection of our facilities inventory is eligible for an updated condition rating. So even though we may be investing in state of good repair and modernization improvements to our stations and our facilities, many of these improvements are not necessarily reflected in the condition assessment data until several years after the project's completion. Just wanted to make sure that that note is out there. Sometimes this measure has a bit of a lag and takes a couple of years to catch up to improvements to facilities. So as you can see, this measure improved significantly in fiscal year 23, and we hit both targets, which is great news. The fiscal year 23 condition assessment cycle resulted in improved condition ratings for a large number of facility assets. I have them listed on the slide, but I'll just call some of them out. Worcester Union Station, Fields Corner, Route 128 Garage, Lynn Bus Garage, and then a number of other smaller support facilities. The fiscal year 24 targets do take into consideration the list of assets that we are planning to assess during this fiscal year. Our target for administrative and maintenance facilities assumes things will stay pretty level. And for passenger and parking facilities, we are targeting a slight increase in this measure. There are not specific assets that we have identified as being likely to receive a downgrade in condition, but this is just accounting for the possibility that a small number of assets that are currently rated a 3 or above may receive a rating lower than 3 this year. Next slide, please. So the last measure, infrastructure, focuses on the percentage of revenue track miles with speed restrictions as a proxy for condition. Speed restrictions are slow zones where the maximum permissible speed of transit vehicles is set to a value below the full service speed. And these can be caused by a number of things, including track defects, signaling issues, construction zones, maintenance work, really a variety of causes. But permanent restrictions that may be related to curves in the track, bridges, grade crossings, things like that, these like features along the right of way, those are not included in this measure. This measure is an average using a single data sample from each of the 12 months of the year. This is a set methodology by the FTA, and this is kind of how we do this for the purposes of NTD. I just wanted to point that out because the MBTA has a number of speed restriction related resources and data sets out there. And while this data comes from the same place as what you'll see on, for example, the MBTA's speed restrictions dashboard, the methodology is very different. And so when it's rolled up to a high level metric, those numbers just may not match up exactly. Next slide, please. So looking at this by mode, for commuter rail, performance improved from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23. We generally tend to hover at around 3 or 3.5% for commuter rail, but we typically set the target at 4% to account for that slight fluctuation we tend to have. For the transit side, as many of you know, our speed restrictions have increased significantly, and we implemented a large number of speed restrictions last fiscal year across the transit system. This is reflected in the measures for the last couple of years. As you can see, there's quite a bit of a jump from fiscal year 22 to 23. Targets were calculated based on our performance in the last quarter of 23 and the first quarter of 24. So based on speed restriction data for that 6-month period. And based on that, we are targeting a continued increase in this measure for both heavy and light rail in fiscal year 24. That being said, track renewal is an ongoing effort, and the MBTA is committed to improving the condition of our track assets and reducing speed restrictions overall on the rapid transit system. Many of you may be familiar with our track improvement program that is underway now, and we are working through the end of this calendar year and beyond to address track condition on the transit system. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. I will pass this back to Sam.
Thank you, Angela. We will now move on to the CADA and MWRTA targets. Next slide, please. So here we have recent performance and targets on rolling stock for both CADA and Metro West. CADA expects slight improvement for its buses and trolleys, meaning fewer vehicles in its buses and trolleys that exceed the useful life benchmark as compared to the 2023 performance. For CADA's cutaway vehicles, the 2024 target has been relaxed as compared to 2023 to account for replacement vehicles that did not arrive as scheduled due to supply chain issues. Excuse me. For those unfamiliar, cutaway vehicles are smaller buses that are mounted on the chassis of a van or a light-duty truck. The MWRTA has set its 2024 targets to be identical to 2023 actual performance. There are no expected changes to its fleets of automobiles, cutaway vehicles, or vans, and that no additional vehicles are expected to exceed useful life benchmark this year. Next slide, please. So next we will move to equipment vehicles. There are no expected changes in the fleets of equipment vehicles for either CADA or Metro West. It should be noted that these two RTAs have fleets of equipment vehicles, which again are non-passenger vehicles that are much smaller than those of the MBTA. For example, CADA has 3 equipment vehicles on hand. Next slide, please. Similarly, for RTA facilities, both CADA and Metro West expect that all of their facilities will once again score 3 or above on the FTA's term scale, demonstrating adequate facilities and giving them a 0% target for 2024, just as they had in 2023. Next slide, please. Rolling stock or passenger vehicles show mixed results. MBTA and CADA continue to phase in new vehicles for some vehicle classes, while other vehicle classes, such as MBTA's paratransit vans, are still usable, but age past their useful life benchmark. There are no expected meaningful changes to the ratings of facilities for each of the RTAs. And with fixed guideway infrastructure, which involves MBTA rail tracks, there's a forecasted decrease in performance in state fiscal year 2024, and MBTA has set targets accordingly. However, while the percentage of rail segments with slow zones is expected to increase from last year, this decrease is largely due to the required maintenance being performed on the tracks over the next couple of years, so that the number of slow zones can decrease in future years. Next slide, please. Given all of these TAM performance measures, MassDOT and the MPO have avenues for improving transit assets. Both MassDOT and the MPO can consider asset condition and potential improvements when scoring projects. And the MPO especially considers TAM needs in projects funded through the Transit Transformation and Transit Improvement programs, which are part of the TIP. Next slide, please. And finally, MPO staff requests that the Boston Region MPO move to support the staff recommended set state fiscal year 2024 transit asset management targets. The deadline for adopting these targets is March 31st, and these targets would be incorporated into programming for the 2025 to 2029 TIP. Thank you for your attention. I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for discussion.
All right, so are there any questions for Sam on the general items of the target or the ones specified for CADA or Metro West? Brian and then Steve, and then I'm going to go to Angela after we go over the general stuff on CADA and Metro West. All right, go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Steve. I just wanted to note for my colleagues that because I tend to ask a lot of questions, I myself and another member received a briefing on this topic in advance from the team, and very grateful for that. They answered all of my questions. I'm very satisfied with the MBTA's targets. Obviously, we wish that some of them were better, but this is one of those situations where we can't let the perfect get in the way of the good. And I urge all of my colleagues on the board to approve this. Thank you.
All right, Steve.
Yeah, I was wondering, on rating the condition of parking lots, garages, and stations, if you include stormwater management systems. I don't know whether it's required by federal or not, but I think that's an important element of rating the condition of stations.
I am not sure off the top of my head. I do know that that includes a number of different components. I believe so, but I don't want to misspeak. I can confirm and follow up with you. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to urge that because I know I'm familiar with the Route 128 garage, which is located in an area of considerable environmental concern. And there are very specific conditions laid out by the Dedham Conservation Commission and the Westwood Conservation Commission for how to maintain those stormwater systems in that critical area. So I think that should be part of the things that the RTAs look at when they rate these things. Thank you.
All right, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I just have a few questions. Does the full TAM include targets for beyond just the next year? And I'm just, obviously us as the board thinks in usually 5-year TIP kind of timeline. So, having a target that's supposed to help us, support MBTA's investments or TIP investments for rolling stock and things like that, it feels like this isn't kind of enough information to help us, especially if we're just talking about the rest of the year. So I guess that's a question as to why do we not talk about targets in a 4-year timeline to help us better think about investments?
Sam?
Yes. So Jim, for this federal requirement, yes, targets are set annually. They're not set in longer increments like you just stated. However, RTAs, MBTA, CADA, and Metro West all submit transit asset management plans every 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Those were last delivered in 2022. There will be another one in 2026 for each of them. And that is sort of like the longer term planning document, but those do not necessarily include long-term targets.
So I think you're answering my question. So that the 4-year plan that's submitted to FTA does not include, here's our targets for the 25, 26, 27, right? That's what you're telling me. And is there any reason why we shouldn't be looking a little bit longer, just so we can understand and help support or make decisions on investments?
Anyone say?
So I can.
Go ahead, Angela. Go ahead.
Yes, I think you're asking about the sort of the MPO's role in that long-term planning, but I can just speak to the MBTA. Like when we are developing projects that should go into the CIP, we are looking at the past few years of NTD, and our asset inventory is always changing. So this is one very small piece in the way we do transit asset management. And again, this is a requirement of the TAM final rule. But I do want to assure you there is longer term planning happening. It's just not part of this process.
Yeah, no, I know that it is. So it's just like, this feels like not much helpful. Sorry, not to be disrespectful, but you know, if all we're talking about is just gonna reporting how much older the vehicles are gonna be in a year, versus looking a little bit longer term, because obviously we all know procurement of vehicles and rolling stock and assets take years and years to plan for. So it's like, and maybe that's, you know, participation in the CIP is where we should get that sort of information or help with that. But
So Jim, I think on the longer range, the 4-year plans, the MPO does have a role in approving those. So this is just really filling the annual obligation to approve these targets. So.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, just kind of jumping off Jim's comment, I'm wondering if, I guess maybe in future presentations of these targets, if they could be put in the context of those longer term planning efforts that it sounds like are already underway. It just might help us kind of contextualize it a little bit better.
Okay, I think that makes sense going forward. So Sam, take note of that, Angela, and we'll work with the RTAs. All right, Leonard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to say to Jim, I had a similar concern, and I was the person that was thankfully able to meet with the staff along with Brian. And I would say, you know, to you and Jen and others, who are interested, maybe we can work together to figure out maybe some way, you know, to get some better insight into the longer range plans of the T with respect to assets. So that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Sandy.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, Len and Brian and everybody who's commented, Jen and Jim. Just wanted to offer that, yeah, we're absolutely prepared to work with anybody who's interested in these topics and how it integrates with other elements of MBTA long-range planning. Mr. Chair and others, you know, let us know what you'd like to see in terms of a process. Angela, you've done a great job today, and she's the real technical expert. But, you know, we stand ready to coordinate any future conversations on this and to help frame up conversations.
All right. Thank you, Sandy. Anyone else? Jen and Jim.
I'll defer to Jim first.
I guess just confirming that like this work assumes things like the opportunities to like overhaul vehicles like we did with but the T did with the Silver Line vehicles, right? So like midlife overhauls or doing some significant overhauls of existing rolling stock is incorporated into this work, right?
So because again, the specifics of like this reporting and then like larger asset planning, that can be very different. This reporting is just based on vehicle age. So an overhaul is meant to get a vehicle to the end of its useful life. And that is an important component of our asset planning and our vehicle planning. Overhauls don't necessarily have an impact on this methodology and this analysis though. So this is assuming we are doing the overhauls to get the vehicles to whatever their benchmark is.
Okay, I thought in some instances an overhaul could extend the useful life of a vehicle, but maybe you're telling me that's not actually the case. So thank you. I'm just curious about that element.
No, that is true. It is just very rare that it will actually represent a life extending overhaul.
Gotcha.
Jen?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just want to thank Angela for presenting this level of like detail that you did on these measures. I think I had many more questions when I was just reading the memo, and I think having you come and explain where some of those kind of trend lines were coming from was really helpful. And I also, I guess maybe we'll make an ask for that maybe in the future, Metro West and CADA might also kind of provide that additional level of presentation and explanation as well.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Jen. Obviously, their scale is different, so it's going to look a little different. But all right, anyone else? All right, anyone want to make a motion and a second to approve the targets as detailed by Sam and Angela? Brian.
I move approval, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Eric.
I'll second the motion.
All right, last chance. Any questions? All right, seeing none, Dave, you want to read the roll?
Pardon me, coming off mute. Yes. Steve Wolfel,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins,
Dickens, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Karen Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen.
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Thank you. Melissa Tentaklis, Chris Diorio,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
thank you. Have I missed anyone? The motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
All right, thank you, Sam, and thank you, Angela and David and everyone else. Let's move on to agenda item 9, which is federal fiscal year 2024 to 2028. Tip amendment number 5. Ethan, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO. As was just mentioned, the purpose of my first presentation here today is to present Amendment 5 to the federal fiscal years 2024 and 28 Transportation Improvement Program, the current TIP. If we can go on to the next slide, this is a fairly small amendment with 2 projects in it for the federal fiscal years 2024 and 25 statewide highway programs. This includes the delay of Middleton's bridge replacement of Route 62 project, which traverses the Ipswich River, to federal fiscal year 25 from 24, and the delay of a bridge preservation contract containing 5 bridges that carry State Route 1A in East Boston and their associated ramps also into federal fiscal year 2025. These are both statewide highway funded projects, and the recommendation for a delay to fiscal 25 is also meant to reflect some recent updates made at the TIP Readiness Days discussion earlier in February for these specific projects. In addition, this amendment also incorporates some additional detail for existing MBTA projects and programs that are already in the TIP, and they will be attached to the TIP on that website after this amendment has been endorsed. So with that, just to go into the specific project changes themselves in the next slide here, with the first project being the Middleton Bridge replacement in fiscal 24 for the Ipswich River. The project was delayed out of federal fiscal year 24 to 25 due to some lagging submissions and progress there for the 25% design. That design was expected to be obtained in August of 2023. The most recent schedule for the project is now indicating a fiscal 25 start year, and there has been a small increase in the project's total estimated cost of about $150,000 approximately. That'll be reflected on the next slide. The other project, which is the bridge preservation project in East Boston with 5 different bridges on State Route 1A. Similar case here, based on the most recent schedule for the project. Notice to proceed for construction is now slated for December 2024, which falls within federal fiscal year 25, although it is still in calendar year 2024. And if we go on to the next slide, given that these projects are both being delayed out of federal fiscal year 24, this slide reflects what the impact is to the statewide highway program in federal fiscal year 2025, and also, again, reflects that approximately $150,000 cost increase for the Middleton Bridge project. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide, MPO staff are requesting that the board moves to vote to release Amendment 5 for a 21-day public comment period, given that this is an amendment, and public comment would commence next Monday, March 11th, with conclusion on April 1st, 2024. And with that, happy to field any questions.
All right. First, let me get a motion a second to send this up for public comment, then I'll open up to questions. Len, do you have a question, or do you want to make a motion?
I have a question, but you know what? I can multitask this time. You know, put up that motion. You know, to approve this for well, not approve it, but to put it out for public comment.
Eric?
I'll second that motion.
All right, Leonard, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, just quickly, that 145K, Ethan, it seems like that's just the 4% standard increase that we give to the project.
That's actually based on the most recent cost estimate for the project, not an inflation factor.
Oh, really? Just have to be a coincidence. Interesting. Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, anyone else have any questions? All right, seeing none. David, do you want to read the roll, please?
Yes. Steve Wolfle,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Gerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozes,
David Kozes, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Melissa Tantakoulis, Chris Diorio, pardon me,
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel, going to the next, Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
With that, the motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ethan. We'll now move to agenda item 10, which is federal fiscal years 2025 to 2029 TIP project scores. Ethan, please take it away.
Thank you. So for my second presentation today, this presentation will discuss the scoring results for projects that are being newly evaluated for inclusion in the next federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 TIP. So if we can go on to the next slides, today's presentation is going to summarize how this discussion of new project scores relates to the TIP development process and the overall timeline of TIP development now that we are in March. I will then go into detail on how each of the projects that were evaluated for the TIP scored. There were 30 projects that were considered, and provide an update on so-called fill-in projects or projects that may be considered in future MPO board meetings, in addition to these ones to utilize any unprogrammed funds in different years of the TIP. Then I will go into detail again on how other upcoming MPO meetings may utilize the information that I will be presenting here today to make decisions on which projects should be programmed, and of course culminate in questions and discussion there. If we go on to the next slide, as part of my presentation here today, there are two different resources posted on the MPO's calendar. The first is a description of newly scored projects, which largely mirrors the content that will be present on my slides here today. I will note that some of the information on that description page is a little bit out of date, namely with regard to some of the scores for the projects, though they may not differ too much, although there are a couple of cases where the scopes of work on some projects may be different as well. Moreover, there is the Federal Fiscal Years 25-29 TIP Scoring Summary PDF page, which provides a high-level overview not only of how each project scored overall, but also a breakdown on how each project scored against each of the MPO's vision, goals, and criteria areas for the TIP. For the design pilot projects, not only is the design cost request listed, but also, just as a point of reference, the construction costs are listed as well, for those who may be interested. So moving on to the next slide to talk about the TIP development timeline. Right now, given we are on March 7th, we are now at the point where we are presenting final scores to the MPO after about 3 months of not only evaluating projects, but also considering feedback from the project proponents that submitted them. This is really the part of the TIP development cycle in which development ramps up at MPO board meetings and also the new TIP process readiness and engagement committee meeting. If we can go on to the next slide, we can zoom in a little bit closer to see exactly what I mean by there. That being that for each week following this one, all the way through into mid-April, there will be either a TIP process readiness and engagement committee to discuss programming scenarios for new projects, or the presentation of programming scenarios for a vote for adoption or consideration by MPO board members. The idea being here that the information presented here today would inform strategies of development to addressing various problems of the TIP at these committee meetings, with those discussions culminating in a summary for a vote at the MPO board meetings. The final scenario for the federal fiscal years 25 to 29 TIP is planned to be voted on at the April 4th MPO board meeting, and the draft TIP itself, which includes that scenario, would go out for public review and comment on April 18th. So, without further ado, let's get into the project scoring results on the next slide and the one after that. So, as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, staff received 30 project applications during the project application period of November 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023. We also received a couple after that date as well, just because we anticipated that due to lower than typical application volumes in some of our larger programs, that there may be a need for some fill-in projects in future years. So to break down that 30 projects, 15 of those 30 projects were for the new project design pilot, which funds projects for design only so that they may advance towards the potential to obtain construction funding in future TIP cycles. Of those 30 projects, 4 were for construction in the MPO's core investment programs, which are things like complete streets, intersection improvements, bicycle network and pedestrian connections, and the major infrastructure program. We also typically include transit transformation in those programs, but we've broken it out separately here to highlight that in its first year of open applications, we did receive 1 application, the transit transformation program. And in addition, there were also 10 applications for the community connections program. These figures do not account for several Cape Ann Transportation Authority and 1 additional Metro West Regional Transit Authority projects that are currently still being scored by MPO staff and are reflected on that scoring summary PDF form that I referred to earlier. With that, if we can go on to the next slide, let's start off with the design pilot projects that MPO staff received in alphabetical order. So first off is the new bike path and shared use path connection over the MBTA's Fitchburg line at Danahy Park in Cambridge. This project is being proposed by Cambridge with a design funding request of $3 million with a score right now of about 78.1 points. Unlike many of the projects that I will be discussing here today, this project is unique in that it has already received approval from MassDOT's Project Review Committee, which happened back in December of 2023. The main focus of this project is creating a connection not only between open space and recreational sites at Danahy Park, but also affordable housing developments on the opposite side of the MBTA's Fitchburg line for a later connection into Alewife Red Line Station and the different parking garages there as well that many commuters utilize. The city is also pursuing additional opportunities in order to fund design, including an application to the Federal Reconnecting Communities Grant Program to design this one project. Similarly, the next project also provides connections to commuter facilities and MBTA rail sites, in addition to MWRTA bus facilities, being the Chris Walsh Trail Phase 2. This is an $850,000 request from the city of Framingham, which is currently has a score of 73.9, though I believe that score may be revised upward further, pending some discussions that were recently had between some MPO staff and the city. This is a shared use path that would extend the existing plans for Phase 1 of the Chris Walsh Trail, which is funded in part by a federal earmark, further southward through Farm Pond, over a Mass Water Authority aqueduct, and eventually into Framingham MBTA station to provide additional connectivity to the Banana Lot and other MWRTA facilities near to Framingham Station. Moreover, there's additional connections here to planned redevelopment and housing construction, including some that is already underway within Framingham and other commuter and employment opportunities as well. And in addition, for the broader rail and trail network, there are ties to future extensions of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and also this would connect to the northern terminus of the Upper Charles River Rail Trail. And lastly, this project would also conclude very close to the Route 126 and 135 interchange project, which is listed on the MPO's long-range transportation plan. The next project is also in the Metro West area, which is Hudson's Massachusetts Central Rail Trail Extension. This was a request from Hudson for $909,700 with a score of 61.7 and is at the project initiation phase. This trail would not only expand and extend the Massachusetts Central Rail Trail, which would eventually go as far east into Waltham, but would also provide additional connections to the existing Aspet River Rail Trail, not only that goes down to Marlborough, but this extension would take it further out into Berlin as well. Moreover, additional and adjacent municipalities are also working on their own extensions of the Massachusetts Central Rail Trail. In addition to this one, and the proposed project here would design the entirety of the rail trail throughout the town of Hudson, not just one part of it. For the last bike network and pedestrian connections design project, we have a unique joint application from multiple communities here. These being the communities of Norfolk, Rentham, and Walpole, with a request for $1.55 million and a score right now of about 65 points, though again, that may be a case where it may be revised upward further if further design or further proponent feedback is considered by staff. This is a joint effort by 3 communities in 2 different subregions of the MPO to design a bike route that would serve as the main focal point or backbone of a more broad local bicycle network. It connects not only to planned and existing housing developments, but developments that are also planned under Section 3A MBTA communities compliance, though those sites are still up for exact determination. Some tentative sites have been identified directly abutting these projects in at least 2 of the 3 communities. Moreover, there's additional connections here to areas with a large amount of vulnerable users, including King Philip Regional High School in Rentham at the southern terminus, and also areas of open space, including at the Rentham State School. And there's also connectivity to different areas of employment on areas like Cushing and Shire Drive as well. Moreover, in addition to this being a local joint application, this is also part of the multi-state 10-mile River Greenway Trails effort as well here. So there are broader regional and state coordination matters there to consider. So moving out of the bicycle network and pedestrian connections program into complete streets. Complete streets represented the bulk of design pilot applications this year. And again, just starting alphabetically in Acton, this was a request for $860,000 to design connections on Great Road from Harris Street to the intersections at Davis Road. The focus of this corridor would be to improve safety for vulnerable users where bicycle paths and sidewalks do not currently exist. This corridor has a very high concentration of existing multifamily housing throughout its entirety and therefore provides critical connections between each of those sites, despite the fact that there are no current sidewalk or bike amenities available at this time. The next project in Arlington is a actually should have a name revision, and that is requesting $1.4 million to take this project to 100% design. The item that may be reflected on the scoring summary at this time reflected a cost estimate to take the project to 25% design only, and the project name has not been changed to reflect that yet. The project score has a score of 80.1 and is also at the initiation stage, with the project focusing on a comprehensive redesign of the Broadway corridor in Arlington, not only to bolster connectivity to things like the Alewife Brook Greenway Path and the Minuteman Commuter Bikeway, but also to parallel improvements in Somerville that would go towards Alewife Brook Parkway, which is a joint project with DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation. As a complete streets project, this is a comprehensive overhaul to improve not only bicycle and pedestrian amenities, but transit user amenities as well, including improved bus stops, curb bump outs, and other intersection safety considerations. Moreover, Arlington has adopted MBTA community zoning and compliance measures, and this corridor is included within one of Arlington's Section 3A MBTA communities districts as well on that Broadway corridor. Similarly, while the city of Boston is not, I believe, subject to Section 3A MBTA communities compliance, this next project is a slightly unique project in that it is being actually considered for the Transit Transformation Program, even though it applied for under the Complete Streets program. The Bennington Street project in East Boston is a focal point for various new high-density transit-oriented developments in East Boston, including at 355 Bennington near Day Square. The request here is $1.5 million for a joint operation led by Boston, with the MBTA acting as a steward, to design improvements of Lower Bennington Street with a focus on improving transit connectivity and mitigating urban heat island effects, with safety improvements and pedestrian improvements also incorporated there. Bus improvements would include transit signal priority, bus bump outs, and additional transit connectivity, things like updated shelters, to improve not only connections to the MBTA Blue Line at Wood Island and that busway there, but also additional work on Meridian Street for connectivity to Maverick Station as well. This project may be separated from the other project design items in programming scenarios if the MBTA is handling design. As mentioned, this would be a transit transformation classified project and would therefore not count among all of the other design projects currently being evaluated if that is the case. The next project is in Malden. The city of Malden applied for 2 projects through the MPO's project design pilot. This first one is a request for $2.6 million for a comprehensive improvement project on Route 60. This being really the entirety of Route 60 in Malden from Pleasant Street down to Lynn Street. The primary focus of this project is improving bicycle connectivity, not only along the corridor itself, but interconnections with things like the planned Spot Pond Brook Greenway and also the Northern Strand and community paths there as well. Bus improvements would include not only shelters and upgrades there, but also transit signal priority to reduce transit passenger delay. Moreover, the western terminus of this project not only includes a large concentration of existing public facilities, not only Malden City Hall and things like the MBTA's Orange Line stations and commuter rail facilities, but also areas planned for redevelopment for Section 3A MBTA communities compliance. And given the size of this corridor, there are other public facilities including schools, police stations, and other emergency response sites as well, and open space. The next Malden project is in a similar area to this one, though running adjacent to the Route 60 corridor, this being the Commercial Street Reconstruction Project, a request from the city of Malden for $935,000 with a score of 62.5. This project would connect to planned commercial and housing developments near and around Malden Center T Station, and would also incorporate some riverine flood mitigation improvements along the corridor, given the proximity to Malden River, which is known to overflow. As the name implies, Commercial Street is a high-density employment corridor, which provides jobs for many residents, not only within Malden, but also beyond to it, and it would mirror improvements that were recently completed on the other side of the border by the city of Medford on this roadway. Moving on to the next project, this one in Marlborough. This is a request for $1.215 million to reconstruct Granger Boulevard. As with the Cambridge Dan Heap Park project I mentioned earlier, this project has already received approval through MassDOT's Project Review Committee and would be a complete streets and transit improvement project potentially to link the Assabet River Rail Trail's terminus, just about 1 block north of the West Main Street intersection, within Marlborough's downtown, by right-sizing the roadway to reduce pedestrian crossing distances there, improve connectivity not only to open space, but affordable housing in Marlborough Housing Authority sites within the project area, and focus on user safety at key intersections throughout, adding bicycle connections where they don't currently exist, and improving pedestrian connectivity where road crossings may be currently unsafe. This next project in Salem is the Broad Street and Dalton Parkway Corridor project. The cost estimate for this project was initially requested at $250,000, but is also being evaluated for current review, or I should say being reevaluated and further reviewed by the city as new cost estimates may emerge. The estimate for construction at this time is about $2.5 million, hence the 10% estimate for design costs there. The project status is currently at the initiation phase, and as with the Marlborough project, focuses on right-sizing the roadway of Broad Street in order to provide access to new housing, some of which includes adaptive reuse sites for different public facilities along the Broad Street roadway. There's also improvements to Dalton Parkway as well to provide intersection safety at multiple points along the corridor, including access improvements to Collins Middle School. This next project is the last complete streets project for consideration on the project design pilot, which is the reclamation of Marlborough Road, Route 85, and Framingham Road from the Marlborough City Line to Route 30 in the community of Southborough. This is a request for $1.315 million and would aim to construct new sidewalks and a bike path where none currently exists on Marlborough Road to mirror bike lanes that were recently completed on Maple Street in Marlborough. There's also key improvements here to heat impacts and water quality improvements for along the entirety of the corridor, given the project's proximity to the Sudbury Reservoir and other sensitive natural areas along the roadway. With that, if we move on to the next area, we have the last section of design pilot projects, this being intersection improvements, within which there are 3 projects. The first of the 3 intersection improvement candidates is the intersection improvements of Route 3A Cambridge Street and Wynn Street in Burlington, with a request for $1.7 million and a score of 62.5. This project also has received Project Review Committee approval recently, back in December 2023. The focus of this project is on addressing intersection safety at 3 different priority intersections, and as with some other projects here, focusing on traffic calming by right-sizing the roadway and reducing vehicle speeds for improved safety for all users. with the Cambridge and Wynn Street intersection at the center of the project being subject to plans for a comprehensive redesign to improve accessibility not only to areas of existing public housing or existing concentrations of multifamily housing, but also public facilities and commercial sites as well. On the next slide, these next two projects are similar to the Norfolk, Wrentham, and Walpole project, a joint effort by the towns of Holliston and Sherburne for two separate safety projects that are both within the Route 16 corridor. This first one being a targeted intersection safety improvement at Route 16 and Whitney Street in Holliston with a request for $250,000 to design at a score of 42.8. This is a very targeted traffic signal upgrade project between Route 16 and also Whitney Street being a driveway for a large amount of commercial vehicles. While many of the safety improvements are initially targeted at this intersection, there are additional proximal improvements planned, not only for the crossing of the Upper Charles River Rail Trail right nearby, but there's also plans for sidewalk extension as part of this project further westward to Locust Avenue, such that there is a direct pedestrian connection between Whitney Street and also into downtown Holliston as well. And as mentioned, this is a joint effort with our next project that also includes Route 16, which is the reconstruction of routes 27 and 16 in Sherburne. This project is requesting $900,000 with a score of 81.8, also at the initiation stage for corridor safety improvements to improve accessibility for all roadway users in downtown Sherburne, not only including bicycle and pedestrian improvements, but also transit accessibility improvements. This would address problems at several key intersections throughout the area and elsewhere along Route 16, as would be done by the Holliston project, and potentially incorporate driveway consolidation to improve safety near to public facilities, areas of concentrated housing, and planned areas potentially for new housing as well. Moreover, the project would also aim to improve stormwater and other water quality improvements, and part of the project area even includes a rail grade crossing. There would also potentially be transit improvements as well, given the stops that the MWRTA currently operates for, I believe, Route 16 in downtown Sherburne. Might be wrong on Route 16 though. I should say MWRTA Route 16, not State Route 16. So with that, if we can move on to the next stage, we have our construction projects, starting off again in the bike network and pedestrian connections. We have one project here, if we go on the next slide. This is the bike path construction of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail from the Sudbury Diamond Railroad crossing to Eden Road West. The proponent for this project is Sudbury, though 200 feet of the project does go into Framingham, with a funding request of $8.82 million. Scoring for this project is still underway, namely the equity scoring component still needs to be completed here, but the project has not only recently received Project Review Committee approval in June 2023, but the current schedule for the project anticipates a 25% design submission in June 2024. Given that this is the federal fiscal year's 25 to 29 tip, when this next tip comes into effect, this project would likely be at 25% design if it stays on schedule. Again, scoring for this project currently remains underway, but this is the final phase of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Sudbury, one of 3 phases, and would not only complete the trail in Sudbury, but then establish a beachhead upon which Framingham may continue the trail further southward. This next project, if we go into Complete Streets, for we have 2 there, our 2 Complete Streets projects this year are actually returning projects from last year with some additional improvements into their scope since their application for the federal fiscal year 24-28 tip. This first one is the roadway rehabilitation of Route 126 from the Interstate 495 ramps to the Medway Town Line in Bellingham. This is a request for $13.9 million with a score of 54.3. While the project did apply last year and was still at Project Review Committee approval at its application stage, the reason why this project has not yet achieved 25% design is because the project has actually improved and expanded its scope up from providing initially bicycle lanes to a full shared use path of about, I believe, 11 feet throughout the corridor, and not only doing stormwater improvements at the northern terminus of the project with bridge widening work to accommodate that path, but also taking culverts within the project area, namely conveying Stall Brook, bundling that into the project area, and ensuring that those culverts may be widened into full bridge structures to improve riverine flood capacity in the area as well. This project installs new signals where there aren't currently any signals, provides full bilateral sidewalks throughout the project area, that aforementioned shared use path, improves the condition of the roadway, also stormwater mitigation improvements, and not only provides access to areas of single-family housing near to schools, but also planned development sites potentially for multifamily housing, including some housing that's already under construction. The next project, as with a previous application from last year, is Ipswich's Argilla Road project. The new name of this project is the Argilla Road Ecological Title Restoration Project, whereas last year was the Argilla Road Reconstruction Project. The funding request for this project has also increased accordingly with its scope, in that the project is now requesting about $13.2 million to construct, with a score of 37.9. The reason for this project score, and also its project review committee approval still not yet being at 25%, is that this project focuses on doing resiliency improvements in a very sensitive area of Argilla Road, in which widening of the road would cause fairly damaging impacts to areas of endangered species and also the marshes that are around the Ipswich River. This project has had its scope increased to elevate more of the roadway from a at-grade level, I should say 6.5 feet above sea level to 9 feet throughout, in order to ensure that it can not only handle 2100 flood conditions for the year 2100, but incorporate additional culverts into the project area. By incorporating these culverts, the project would make it so that if the road is overtopped by floodwaters, the floodwaters would not take any contaminants that are on the roadway and bring them into the marsh. Rather, floodwaters would be conveyed underneath the roadway, ensuring not only safe accessibility of the road year-round, but also ensuring that waters would not necessarily damage adjacent marshes. In addition to the addition of the new culverts, the elevation of the roadway, intersection improvements of the driveways for Crane Beach, and also for the Crane Estate, there would be additional incorporation of improvements for things like restoration of the marshes, shoulder and bank stabilization so that while sidewalks will not be incorporated, pedestrians may still use a stabilized shoulder in order to access the beach if they would so wish, and removal of various man-made structures around the project area, including a weir to improve flood capacity improvements there as well. And again, while this project is still not yet at 25% design, it has made progress over the last year towards accomplishing permits for the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and navigating and improving the scoping process that is still undergoing with MassDOT District 4 and Highway Division headquarters. So with that, we have our last project for construction here before we get into community connections, which is the intersection improvements project in Quincy on the next slide. This is the intersection improvements at Willard Street and Ricciuti Drive, which is near exit 8 for Interstate 93 southbound. This project has scored 41.1 and is at a 75% design stage. This is a targeted intersection safety project at the off-ramps to provide a shared use path at the intersection and calm traffic overall. This planned shared use path, while it is small in the intersection area, as the funding request is 1.8 million, would connect into bicycle lanes that are planned by the city of Quincy for Ricciuti Drive. Ricciuti Drive not only provides access to Quincy Quarries, which is, I believe, part of the broader Blue Hills network, but also further westward along Ricciuti Drive are areas of large multifamily housing developments as well. So moving on, I misspoke earlier, into the Transit Transformation Program for our one project there. As was mentioned earlier in the meeting, the Metro West Regional Transit Authority is seeking $1.98 million for the procurement of 3 29-foot buses. The Transit Transformation Program uses a set-aside amount of $6.5 million in a given year, though this year it was only $2 million, to fund projects, just like with Community Connections, that apply directly to it. The Metro West Regional Transit Authority was the sole applicant during the application period for that funding. This project to procure these vehicles scored 52.2 points and would aim to utilize the procurement of the authority's first 29-foot buses within their fleet to utilize a compressed natural gas power plant so that they can operate transit services to meet increasing demand for transit on their routes 4 north and 4 south lines within downtown Framingham and beyond there. By employing these buses, they not only improve the capacity of users to utilize the buses, but versus cutaway vans are using a cleaner transportation alternative to current vehicles and ensuring that no users may be left behind or put in unsafe conditions on vehicles if there are too many riders aboard at that time. With that, if we move into our 10 community connections projects, this first project in Arlington, just clustering the bicycle rack projects up front here, is the installation of 123 bicycle racks and related materials, namely the concrete pads upon which to install these racks within that community. The request here is for $90,878 with a score of 74.5, and as with many community connections projects, is at the planning stage. This would procure 123 racks and expand bicycle parking within Arlington by 246 spaces. Most of the sites planned for this project are located at public schools of all grades within Arlington, fields, arenas, open space, and commercial areas as well. This next project is a fairly sizable request for bicycle rack procurement, being the installation of 1,600 bicycle racks by the City of Boston with a funding request of around $380,000. This project scored 82 points and is at the planning stage. This project is unique in that it is looking to install 1,600 bicycle racks and add 3,200 bicycle parking spaces as part of a much broader effort by the city to replace 6,000 single-space parking meters with multi-space meter kiosks. By eliminating the need for more single-space parking meters, the poles that are currently deployed for those meters could be repurposed to be instead used for a slide-over bicycle rack, thereby enabling expansion of bicycle parking while reducing the necessary footprint of those parking kiosks. And lastly, we have our third bicycle rack procurement project, which is in Scituate, with a request for $22,800 to install 25 bicycle racks with 50 parking spaces. The locations for these projects would be in commercial and tourist districts within Scituate, namely in North Scituate Village and Scituate Harbor, and also Mino Light as well. These are not only, again, commercial sites, but are also areas of open space. So, moving on to our third Malden project for consideration within the federal fiscal years 25-29 TIP. This is the Canal Street Bicycle Lanes project, a request for $81,250 for the first bicycle lanes project that the MPO has received a request for funding for in the Community Connections program. This project has a score of 51.25 and would be the near-term implementation of a bike lane on Canal Street to connect the Northern Strand and future Spot Pond Brook greenways there. And those who have noticed from the design pilot part of this presentation may know that this would also connect to those two other design pilot projects on Commercial Street and on Route 60 as well. It would also potentially incorporate physical barriers into the procurement for a full separated bike lane to connect into the Northern Strand community path. And if we go on to the next slide, we also have one regional on-demand microtransit pilot project for this year, seeking about $500,000 for year one funding. The cities of Chelsea and Revere are looking for a joint application to provide an on-demand microtransit service project across 6.5 square miles in order to fill gaps in MBTA service areas to improve access to commercial sites like the Amazon Distribution Center in Revere, schools, and areas of employment. Critically, this project will also use an app-based structure that would identify and connect users with transit services where those services may be available to substitute the trips they would otherwise make, ensuring that this service does not necessarily supplant any existing transit opportunities there. The current estimate for this project is a ridership estimate of 58 passenger trips per day on the service, with electric vehicles being deployed in tandem with that. If we go on to the next slide, we also have our One Blue Bikes expansion project, also from the city of Revere, requesting the implementation of some new stations and 40 pedal bicycles for $169,000 at Griswold Fields and the intersection of North Marshall and Salem Street in northern Revere. Not only does this project expand the Blue Bikes network further north in Revere, but also creates a new Blue Bike station at the Northern Strand Community Trailhead at that North Marshall and Salem Street intersection. For our last four Community Connections projects, these are four bike share replacement projects that have all been compiled together here because they will all be seeking funding against the set-aside amount of the Bike Share Support Program the MPO recently adopted. These communities being Boston, Brookline, Cambridge, and Somerville, with Boston seeking replacement of 12 stations and a station electrification pilot for about $590,000, with 5 of those stations being selected for having more than 10,000 trips per year, 5 of those stations for their proximity to low-income housing and census tracts, with a high amount of car-free households as well, and also 2 stations that would be subject for piloting of station electrification. Given the city of Boston recently adopted electric bikes into the Blue Bikes network, there's an identified need to find ways to reduce the operating costs of trying to swap out batteries on e-bikes, and by electrifying stations directly into the grid, bikes could potentially in the future be charged at stations, reducing the operating costs of trying to maintain electrified bikes. In Brookline, there is the replacement of 3 stations with 62 pedal bicycles in tandem for $200,000, replacing 3 aging stations in the Coolidge Corner and Brookline Village areas, which are the stations with the highest ridership in Brookline's network. This also provides connectivity to the MBTA C and D branches of the Green Line and high-frequency bus routes 65 and 66. Cambridge is looking to replace 8 stations and 65 pedal bicycles for $385,456, with locations at Central Square, Lafayette Square, Lower Cambridge Port, Harvard University Housing, Harvard River Houses, Linear Park, and Porter. And the fourth and final project here is Somerville's replacement of 13 bike share stations for a request of $278,000, with locations at Somerville City Hall, Union Square, the Beacon at Washington Street intersection, Conway Park, Wilson Square, Davis Square, Ball Square, Nathan Tufts Park, Packard Avenue, Teal Square, 191 Beacon Street, Perry Park, and Broadway at Mount Pleasant. Across these 4 projects, the total request amounts to 36 stations being replaced, 127 bicycles being procured, and a total cost of $1,453,931 against that bike share support set-aside amount. So with that, let's talk about fill-in projects on the next slide. So first off, what is a fill-in project? Those who may have attended the TIP Readiness Days update on February 15th may have identified that there was surplus funding available in some years of the TIP, namely with regard to federal fiscal years 25 and 26. Those who may have been in attendance for previous TIP development cycles, including the fiscal 23-27 and 24-28 TIP development years, may remember that when there are surpluses of funding in those years, the MPO may ask other agencies, including MassDOT or Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority or other regional transit authorities, to provide new projects that may be able to utilize that funding, lest it go unprogrammed as part of TIP development. Staff have engaged regional transit authorities, the Metro West RTA, and also the Cape Ann Transportation Authority much earlier in this effort than in prior TIP cycles in order to enable some time for actually scoring these projects, which is currently underway. These are fill-in projects for federal fiscal years 25 and 26 only at this time, as the current availability of federal fiscal year 29 funding is currently constrained in order to either provide advanced construction to multi-year funded projects on the TIP, such as Rutherford Avenue, Western Avenue in Lynn, and also McGrath Highway in Somerville, or any delays of projects that may have found themselves in the federal fiscal years 27 and 8 programs, during which there is a deficit of funding right now. To summarize these fill-in projects at a very high level right now, as they are still being scored and evaluated, if we can go on to the next slide. We have a couple projects for consideration. The Cape Ann Transportation Authority is requesting 3 projects for federal fiscal year 2025, with a request for $65,000 in fare improvements for its Americans with Disabilities Act compliance and dial-a-ride services. This would be allowing non-cash payment of those for use of those services, approximately $1.3 million in operating facility upgrades, including their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, plumbing, fuel storage and pumps, garage, power supply, and other miscellaneous improvements, not only to bring the facility into a state of good repair, but to modernize and weatherize it to improve energy efficiency, and about $2.5 million to replace 4 of their buses that have reached the end of their useful life with hybrid vehicles using a recent procurement they did with the Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Authority, or MEVA. Again, the scoring of these projects is in the very early stages, and discussions around whether or not these projects should be funded will be part of later MPO project meetings, but I'm highlighting them here today so that folks have awareness of it as we enter those meetings. With the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, there is, in addition to the $1.98 million requested for the bus procurement, a request for $2.5 million of design funding to redesign its Blandon hub and facility for the anticipation of the eventual construction of a new facility with improved employee training and bus bay areas to accommodate a transition to larger vehicles and also eventually other cleaner forms of energy and powers, not only including compressed natural gas, but also potentially hydrogen power and other, in addition, renewable energy sources like solar electrification for the building itself. Lastly, if we can jump off of this, so that first bullet there, the MBTA has historically been engaged by MPO staff in order to consider projects within the federal fiscal years 25 to 29 TIP, and at the discretion of MPO board members, members may request that the MBTA create a project list. This bullet here would highlight that a list may be ready as early as next week's March 14th TIP committee meeting, though there is no list at this time. However, we are expecting some funding requests for additional contributions to some projects that the MPO has already funded, including Columbus Avenue Bus Lanes Phase 2, through which the MPO has supported that phase, the extension of the Columbus Avenue bus lanes from Jackson Square northward to the Ruggles Orange Line Station and commuter rail station, with $14.8 million in federal fiscal year 21 and $11.75 million in federal fiscal year 24. The new request would likely be $7.5 million, therefore smaller than those amounts, to address additional utility needs and further improvements at the Roxbury Crossing Station Plaza. There may also be requests of about $2 million for the rail transformation projects for the commuter rail station in Reading, and additional funding requested for the Jackson Square Station Accessibility Project, in the city of Boston. So with that, let's talk key dates of upcoming MPO meetings. So at the March 14th MPO meeting at 1 p.m. Next week is the TIP Process Readiness and Engagement Committee meeting, during which discussions will be had to shape strategies around the development of initial project scenarios, focusing on which design pilot projects should be selected for funding in fiscal 25, how deficits for funding in federal fiscal years 27 and 8 should be handled for the Regional Target Program, and what the conditions should be to fund projects that are new in federal fiscal year 29. Following that TIP committee meeting at the next March 21st MPO board meeting, any of the discussions that happen there to devise strategies would then be brought back to the MPO board for further discussion, questions, and eventually a vote to decide upon what the scenarios for the TIP should look like. At the March 28th March 28th TIP committee meeting, there would then be a refinement of those scenarios based on feedback received at the previous week's MPO board meeting. And at April 4th, there would be a vote to select, a final TIP scenario. So with that, just some items for consideration and questions to consider before we go to discussion. In addition to everything I have mentioned here today, which is only focusing on new projects for consideration of the federal fiscal years 25 to 29 TIP, there is also the matter of the TIP project cost changes and the potential for the reevaluation of projects as we go into the project scoring and scenario season. Any project that saw any cost increases beyond $2.5 million or 25%, whatever was triggered first, based on the agreement made by the MPO board in 2021 on cost changes, may, at the board's discretion, attend an MPO meeting or explain the reason for that increase. There are 9 projects currently programmed in the federal fiscal years 24 to 28 TIP that qualify for that threshold right now, and that is at the board's discretion. Some of those project proponents will already be looking to attend next week's TIP committee meeting to provide some insight there already. For scope changes and rescoring, any projects that had any form of scope change versus what was already programmed or voted upon in the TIP may be subject to further rescoring, again at the board's discretion. There are 3 projects in the TIP at this time that currently qualify for that. So with that, just in mind and a question to consider there, I'd be happy to open the floor to any questions or discussions.
All right, Eric, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Ethan. That is a tremendous amount of information, and you've done a great job presenting it. I have 2 questions and then 2 potential, requests. They can be motions. I look to you, Mr. Chair, on how you want to address that. But let me ask my questions first. Ethan, what is the total design request versus what we had budgeted for?
Yes, so the total design request was for about $18.4 million versus a budgeted amount in the set aside of $4 million.
Okay, so we have 18.4 of request, and we had essentially budgeted for 4 million.
Yes, there is also additional bandwidth to fund more projects than that, given some of the delays of capital construction projects out of fiscal 25.
That sort of begs the question of then, how would that impact our ability to program projects, down the road? So that might, we don't I'm not looking for an answer today, but that might be something you could address in a future meeting. My second question is, I guess related, how much is available right now in fiscal years 28 and 29? And I know that is subject to change given the moving nature of projects in the near term.
So at this time, federal fiscal year 28 is actually was in a deficit of about $20 million. However, based on the ability to rebalance project costs in fiscal 27 across multiple years and costs in fiscal 28 across multiple years, the tentative scenario that may be presented next week has federal fiscal year 28 at a few $100,000 of additional bandwidth there. That is a figure that we would like to increase further for contingency amounts. For federal fiscal year 29, that is still subject to the discussion the board will have next week. Right now, the tentative scenario plan there still leaves about $11 million of funding in that year, after accounting for potentially including new projects and advanced construction schedules for existing projects as well, and set asides for programs like community connections, transit transformation, and bike share support.
Thank you. So I'd like to formally request, and I don't know if that needs to be a motion or not, that honestly, both the MBTA and the Highway Division prepare some potential projects if we're going to have, unprogrammed funds in the near term.
I don't know if it's I don't think we have to take a formal vote, Eric, but I think for the T representatives and the highway representatives, please, I think you should be ready. We need to have a full set of options as we get into this new TIP year. So I don't think we need a motion or anything, Eric, but I would request the T and highway to actually do those exercises.
Okay, great. And then the other thing is, I do think that we should request that the project proponents that have gone up in cost or had major scope changes, that we invite them to those 2 TIP committee meetings. I think that is one of the purposes of the meeting, was to be able to go more in depth into projects that have had higher increases or scope changes. I think it's up to the proponents whether they want to come or not, but that could be an indication of their commitment to the project. But I think we should request that they come to those meetings.
I agree. Megan, can you make sure you and your staff reach out to those communities and at least offer them the opportunity to come in?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Tegan. All right. Kristen, Leonard, Dennis, Ken, and then Sandy. So Kristen, you're up next.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I was just hoping you could talk a little bit about the process and deadlines for other communities that might want to try to be considered for the fill-in projects.
Yes, so as part of Highway Division bringing projects in, if there are any communities that have a fill-in project, that project, if it is a highway project, would need to be, given that it is in federal fiscal year 25, likely at 75 or 100% design, received in hand by District 3 or by the relevant highway district for your community in that case. Generally speaking, for later years of the TIP, project review committee approval is acceptable for the 5th and final year, though any year before that, it should be 25% design or higher.
So if a project, if someone's looking to get a fill-in project in for consideration in the 26 time ban for that surplus funding, they would need to do that as soon as possible? Is that basically for this?
If the project is not yet already, the next PRC meeting, I believe, is in May. So that would be after completion of, or after adoption of a final TIP scenario, which would mean that the project would already need to have review committee approval, at the very least. Fiscal 26, it would likely need to be at 25 or 75% design.
Thank you.
All right, Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and excellent presentation, Ethan. I love the organization, just everything about it. A few questions, and please just give me a short answer. But first off, I'd like to say to that request for explanations of scope changes and cost changes, I would like to strongly request that be presented in writing, whether or not they come to a TIP committee meeting. So hopefully that would give them give them more time to explain, or more bandwidth for explaining what's going on, and give us more time to understand things, rather than having to just take it in, through through a speech, so that's my question. So question, so on the K to fill in, there was a line there that said that it was for fair improvements. What are fair improvements? And short answer, Ethan.
The proposed project there would install new systems on Cape Ann Transportation Authority's vehicles in order to improve their ability to collect fares that are non-cash.
All right, that's what I thought. I wasn't sure, and let's see. So are there, I looking at the scores, I didn't see any resiliency points. Were we planning on incorporating resiliency into our scoring?
Resilience should be factored in there. It is one of the 6 category areas. I
didn't see it on. Maybe I'm just being
that.
blind.
It may have been cut off on the PDF, but I can provide a new version of that.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
yes,
see,
that is present, as is clean air and healthy communities, which is a related category. Those separate. That should be present, but.
Oh, I think. Okay, I don't see it on some lines. I see it on. Okay, all right. So I'm just not seeing them. So okay, well, I'm glad to see.
I believe it was cut off in the PDF version. Thank you for highlighting that. We'll make sure there is an updated version posted. This table is also posted in the final tip document, so the proper version will also be present there.
Okay, all right. That's really going to help me in selecting, or at least advocating for certain projects. And also in terms of complimenting you. I really liked how on I forget which set of projects you have the cost per points. That's very helpful. And one quick question about the I think it's the Chelsea to Revere microtransit. Is that 5 days a week or 7 days a week?
I would need to verify that, but I believe it's 7 days a week and 19 hours of total operation a day, though 19 hours is not all service hours.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair.
And Leonard, on your first point taken, as you guys reach out to the communities with overruns, just try to consider Leonard's request about having it in writing where we can. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. I am calling on Dennis and then Ken and then Sandy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to commend Ethan for a great presentation. Complex, but you made it very clear and very easy to follow. I want to appreciate that. I want to echo Leonard's comments regarding the written. I think that's very important, especially the complexity of some of these and some of the important issues. So anything in writing in advance would be very helpful. A quick question. I was just wondering, what is the unprogrammed or available funds in 25 and 26 at this point?
Given our current understanding of projects that have seen requests for cost increases, there still remains about $25 million in federal fiscal year 25 and about $10 to $15 million in federal fiscal year 26. That is dependent on the board's willingness because that figure may be inclusive of about $10 million of design projects already factored in. So depending on the number of design projects funded, that figure may be anywhere from 25 to 35.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ethan, for the presentation. Can you put the tip scoring sheet on the screen, Ethan, or someone? I had a question about the bike.
I don't believe it is part of the slide deck, but
okay. Okay, that's fine. So it shows that for the Cambridge, Newbridge, and Shared Use Path, I just had a question. It shows the design cost as being $3 million, but I note that the project is PRC approved. So that must mean that you have a total project estimate. Is that correct?
Yes, let me check the scoring page right now because I should have that on there. And I believe the HTML file that is posted on the MPO meeting calendar has the full detail.
Okay, because the PDF doesn't. Yeah, okay.
Yes, I believe the cost estimate is somewhere around $19 million right now, though while that project is PRC approved, it is not yet reflected in the public-facing version of project info. As that, I believe that's still being handled by Highway.
Okay, because I was just curious about that because so it's a $3 million to design a $20 million project. Seems a little high, but I did have a question. Do you know what the length of that? I mean, I've asked this several times before if there's could be some sense of the extent or scope of these projects. I noticed in the project description there's no length. My take, I looked at the I just looked at a map and it looks to be about 1/3 of a mile. So that would be about $60 million a mile unit cost for a bike path. So I think it would be helpful if you put the length of these all of these projects to some sense, so people get a sense of the scale of these projects in relation to the cost. And I know for the Sudbury project, it says the project cost is $8 million. I'm presuming that's just the project. That is not a design request. Is that correct? That's just
Yes,
for
that
the
is
project.
solely seeking construction funding as design is already funded and underway.
Oh, okay. And then we can just switch to the community connections for a minute. The Chelsea Revere microtransit project. That cost is the annual cost, right? Not the total cost for 3 years.
That is solely the first year cost. Future
Right.
funding years would be at the subject or the discretion and require approval by the MPO board. I believe the funding requests for fiscal 26, if selected, are about 470, and then about 450,000 in fiscal 27, the third and final year of MPO consideration.
Right. So based on that cost and the 58, even if it was 365 days a year, 58 trips a day, that comes out to about 20,000 trips a year. So that's about $25 per trip. Did they present a plan to make the service? And I mean, this is what we're going to be looking for. I mean, it's part of the CMAQ program requirements that they need to provide a plan to make these things self-sufficient after the CMAQ funding is no longer available. So did they provide a plan to do that?
Yes, they haven't provided a written plan, but we have had discussions with both of the project proponents. In addition to seeking funding from the MPO's Community Connections program, the applicant is also seeking a similar amount of funding through the Transit Innovation Grant Program and other sources of local funding to support this as well.
So the total cost would actually be, so the CMAQ funding is only a part of what the total cost would actually be. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct, and that is largely in line with most, if not all, of the shuttles that the MPO has funded to date, which I believe there's about 8 or 9 of them.
Okay, so the unit cost then per trip would be actually higher if they had sought additional funding. Is that correct?
That's correct. The MPO subsidy is often half of the total cost to operate.
Okay, thank you. And just to go back to the issue of the gap in fiscal years 25 and 26. I noted last time, one of the previous meetings, several of the projects, were regional target projects that were delayed. I know that was the result of your TIP day discussions. But has there been any discussion with MassDOT or between MassDOT and staff about whether any of those projects, if they got some specific attention applied to them, that they could actually make it in those years?
We have had discussions with both MassDOT and the project proponents, as the recommendations we used were solely MassDOT's recommendations. Those decisions as to whether or not there should be any deviation from the readiness days prescription would likely happen at next week's TIP committee meeting, though I can say that we have already tentatively adjusted our scenarios to either have a project be delayed 1 year instead of 2 years, or have cost be spread across multiple years based on some of those discussions already, including the potential, some discussions have already been had, of statewide highway involvement in regional prioritized projects, or vice versa.
Great. Okay, thank you very much, Ethan.
All right, I have Sandy and Jen and then Dennis.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So first, I just, as others have said, I really want to thank Ethan for all the enormous amount of work that has gone into this and the very thorough presentation, the clearly enormous amount of information that he holds and knowledge about the various projects. So all the respect to you, Ethan. I just wanted to add a few points of information. First, on Tremont Columbus, since Ethan brought that up, We are still working on nailing down the exact cost estimate for that. Hopefully we'll have that in the next couple of weeks, but we're not exactly sure what the final cost estimate is going to be quite yet. Jackson Square, we have a slightly better estimate, but still working to 100% nail that down. As Ethan said, we do not have a project list yet that is ready for presentation, but I would just ask the chair, the staff, whoever is making decisions, so just let us know what process to follow, whether we are being asked to bring something to the TIP committee or directly to the board. Just let us know, and we're happy to provide something. And just one other piece of side information on the Chelsea project, since this came up, I had seen some information that indicated it might only be 5 days a week. So that would just be something for clarification, since Len had brought that up as a question. Thanks.
Thanks, Sandy. In terms of when the list is, I'll defer to Ethan. He knows the timeline better than I do, but Ethan, just reach back out to Sandy to clarify that, please. All right, I'm assuming Ethan's saying yes. All right, Jen and then Leonard.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to put in my own 2 cents on the timeline pieces that, from my perspective, I think it would be really helpful to have those lists for the next TIPper meeting next week, if that's at all possible, because I think that's when we'll begin the conversation around scenarios. So kind of having a sense of all the possibilities would be fantastic. One just quick question on, and apologies if I missed this, for the Chelsea Revere microtransit pilot, is this for a specific population, or is this open to anyone? I know that different microtransit pilots have had different audiences.
This is open to the full population of both communities and is also a development of an application that was made last year, albeit unsuccessfully, for a workforce shuttle program for Revere. So it is focused on commuters and connections there.
May I provide brief clarification on your comment, Jen, and just say that when Jen requested that the information be ready for the next TIPper meeting, which she, just so that people know the acronym, it's the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee. So she's referring to the committee itself.
All right, thank you, Tegan. Thank you, Jen. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, perhaps to Ken, because Ken was asking about the cost per mile, or per unit distance. And I had complimented Ethan on giving us the scores per point for some of the projects. And so I want to ask Ken, because to me, it's not so much the difference, it's really a matter how many people benefit or what is the overall benefit from it. And so does he see a distinction between like the cost per mile or the cost per point, as we score them?
No, I think all of that information is useful. Any measure of unit cost, I think, is helpful. It could be cost per mile, it could be cost per point, it could be cost per user. It could be any of the. I think any information you have is helpful. There's no black box, but the more information you have, the better you can. It's better to make decisions with more information. That's all.
Thank you.
I mean, we're in the business of comparing projects, right? I mean, so how do you compare projects? Unit costs is one measure.
Yeah, well, I agree. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Ethan, you got something?
Yes, just very briefly with regard to that comment. Right now, as part of scenario development, I am working on making sure that I have measurements available for project cost, length, annual average daily traffic, monthly passenger trips, carbon CO2 reduction by kilogram, CO2 reduction by dollar by kilogram, and the year of latest regional TIP funded project that is not community connections for all of the projects that I have mentioned here today. So while it may not be present on the scoring sheet right now, we are evaluating, considering it, and we'll incorporate that in our scenario discussions.
All right. Anyone else have anything on the tip for today? All right, seeing none, I just want to reiterate what everyone said. Ethan does a great job. A lot of us have been around this table a long time. Remember, this is not easy, so you did a great job. So now the fun starts next week, it looks like. So thank you. All right, in terms of the agenda, I think we're up to member items, agenda item 11. Any member items? All right, no one has any. I just will reiterate, well, I'll just do my usual on the Innovation Conference. If folks are trying to register, the registration is currently paused, and it might stay paused because we're already at 1,200 in-person registrations and we only have space for 1,300, and we don't even have the presenters as part of that number yet. So if you are trying to register, you need to reach out to me, but I'm not guaranteeing it's going to reopen. We might just be pivoting right to virtual. So just let me know if you have questions. All right. With that, can I get a motion second to adjourn, please? Eric, is that a motion?
Brass, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Great meeting today. Thank you.
Leonard.
I agree with Eric in a second.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Sure.
We are adjourned.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Be safe. Thank you.